And just for context, this is the first in a month-long series. So next week we will have our Disability in North Carolina conference. And Beth Fadel from Disability in North Carolina is here, so she can share more about that. The 17th we'll be doing a career trek to Biddy and Bose. The 19th we'll be doing a session on navigating the job search with a disability, and we will end the series with a panel on accommodations and disclosure. In addition to these, we also have an art contest going on, sponsored by Disability in North Carolina, and also in partnership with our Office of Disability Services. So you can submit as a student, faculty member, or staff on what access and equity looks like to you in the workplace. It can be any type of art, and you can win up to $50 and have your art displayed either here in our Career Center or in our Office of Disability Services. So that's what we have for our ending series. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and hand it over to our guest speaker on knowing your rights in the workplace. So Beth, you can take it away.
Great. All right, let me go ahead and get things pulled up here. Fantastic. All right, can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right, and I wanted to come on camera for just a moment and say hello and welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Liam, and thank you to UNC Charlotte for the work you guys are doing to really celebrate National Disability Employment Awareness Month. It's an important part of the overall diversity strategy. I know you guys have been great partners. I know you had hosted your inclusivity mixer not long ago, and we had some really rich conversation about disability and how it relates to the larger diversity strategy within a lot of the companies and alumni that you all work with. So again, thank you for what you're doing. So yes, as Leanne said, my name is Beth Butler Fadel. I'm Executive Director of Disability in North Carolina. We are a private nonprofit that promote and support employers across the state, all focused on increasing opportunities for individuals with disabilities in their companies. So our goal is to help them understand the importance of creating cultures that are open to people with disabilities. And so our topic today on knowing your rights in the workplace is one that's really important. And you're going to hear in my comments today about kind of how we approach some of this work with our companies and the companies that we work with, because this is really the core of what we try to do, and that is to ensure that companies understand the importance of the role that they play in opening up and creating these cultures inclusive of people with disabilities, so that as you approach your careers as individuals with disabilities, you're aware of your rights, but we really hope that that the companies that you work for understand the importance of, again, their role in compliance and abiding by the laws that are there to protect you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump off camera myself, and let's go ahead and get started. So I think it's important to understand statistics around disability. So if you're not familiar with those, 61 million Americans are estimated to be a part of America's population here. That's about 27% of the population, or 1 in 4 Americans. And I will tell you that that's a large number, and it continues to grow. We've seen a jump significantly in the last 2 years, 3 years. For a long time, it hovered right around 57 million, and we are now up to 61 million. Represents the 3rd largest market segment in the United States as well. And so that's important for us to understand. 1 in 3 American families has at least one member of their family that has a disability. And when you combine the family the friends and individuals with disabilities, we're talking about a $1 trillion market segment. And why is that important? Well, because again, businesses that we work with are creating products and services to meet the needs of the individuals across all Americans, right? And so $1 trillion market segment is a significant chunk of that economic segment. So again, very important for us to understand the statistics around this work. When we stretch this to a global conversation, that number jumps to 1.3 billion individuals with disabilities, representing 15% of our world's population. Again, adding in family, friends, and individuals with disabilities, we are looking at an $8 trillion market segment. Those that have annual disposable income over $8 trillion. So again, a significant economic segment and one that companies that we work with are paying attention to. So when we think about the rights of people with disabilities in the workplace, obviously the significant law that we reference is the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that's really the definition that we draw from here in the US specifically. And that definition includes a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, but it also includes those that have a record of such an impairment or are regarded as having an impairment. 74% of disabilities, and this is important if you're not aware of this, but have non-apparent or non-visible disabilities. And so I think that's often the first place I go when an individual asks about the work that I do. When I say we work with companies and we help individuals with disabilities seek, next steps in their careers and employment, because often people think of people with disabilities as either as the pictures on this slide depict, a gentleman in a wheelchair, or someone with a service animal, who is blind or has a visible physical disability. But what's important is those of us, and I fall into this category as well, I have low vision. And so looking at me, you wouldn't know that I had a disability. And that's important because that really puts on some responsibility, right, on us as individuals with disabilities to understand the importance of how we present ourselves at work and when to disclose and when not to disclose. What does that look like for you as an individual? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I heard Leanne say that may be among future topics in this series, but I think it's important in the context of this work and to talk about your rights, kind of speaking to that responsibility that you have as well. So this slide also shows some examples of disabilities, and obviously it's not an exhaustive list, but I include this because again, there's so much more than simply physical or mobility disabilities, but things like epilepsy or diabetes, post-traumatic stress. These are all types of disabilities that looking at someone, you wouldn't know that they had a disability, right? So it's important. So what does the Americans with Disabilities Act cover? So gosh, having just celebrated the 33rd anniversary of the ADA, this is really one of the landmark cases, right? One of the landmark pieces of legislation in the United States. It does prohibit discrimination and guarantees that people with disabilities are given an equal playing field, right? Level playing field, that they have the same opportunities for employment, to purchase goods and services, and to participate in state, local government programs and services as well. That they have access to, parks and recreational events when we talk about the different venues that are are available. Again, public buildings, all of those things are all a part of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So there are 5 titles in the ADA. The one you're probably most familiar with is Title 1. And again, that makes it unlawful to discriminate against qualified individuals with disabilities in employment situations. Title 2 is also a key piece where, again, it's unlawful for state or local governments and their agencies to discriminate through the delivery of their programs and services. So often you'll see that as it relates to state and county services, whether that's medical services or other types of clinics and things like that. Title II would apply there. Title III prohibits this discrimination and access of employment of public accommodations and commercial facilities. So again, that really opens the door to equal access to things like restaurants or convention centers, so that if you want to go see a concert or if you want to go watch the Panthers play, although all right, we're not going to talk about football, but anyway, I am a Bryce Young fan, so yes, I'd still go to watch the Panthers play. Museums and parks, things like that. Again, this speaks to the breadth of the ADA and the role that it plays in expanding life opportunities, right? Just living, aside from just work, it really opens up access to recreation, which is, again, another part of people's lives and an important one. Title IV, it talks more specifically about accessibility of telecommunications services. And then Title V finally prohibits retaliation and coercion against individuals for opposing or participating in investigations related to the practices under or illegal practices under the ADA. So it protects you against any kind of retaliation because you come forward with a violation or propose a violation or allege a violation under the ADA. So I want to talk for just a minute about myths and facts for employers. Now, as I said at the beginning, right, our customers are really our employers, because the better we serve them in creating, again, that corporate culture that is educated and informed about people with disabilities and accommodations, the better opportunities you'll have as you enter the workforce, or people with disabilities, students with disabilities that may be graduating and looking for opportunities for employment. So one of the myths is that the ADA forces employers to hire people with disabilities who are not qualified. And I will tell you that is absolutely not true. What I have experienced, and again, my background, I spent over 25 plus years on the employment side of this conversation, on the corporate side, working in areas of employee relations. And I will tell you, I had numerous conversations with managers over the years. First and foremost, applicants who are hired must be qualified to perform the essential functions of the job that you are hiring them for. So that's an important piece of information. So if you're not qualified for a job, then you're not able to claim that you are being discriminated against under the ADA. So qualifications are a key piece of any hiring process, and that includes people with disabilities. The ADA gives applicants with disabilities preference over applicants without disabilities. And that, again, is not accurate. The ADA does not give hiring preferences to individuals with disabilities. But in fact, again, a qualified individual with a disability means that they're qualified to perform the essential functions of that position. The ADA places financial burdens. Often you'll hear that, oh, accommodations are too expensive, and that it poses a hardship on small businesses that really have difficulty in paying for accommodations. And again, ADA is very clear on this, that businesses with fewer than 15 employees are not covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So again, small businesses are not charged with, a 1 and 2, 3 employee firm is not necessarily, they're not charged with accommodating an individual through, I say the accommodation process. Here's what I have seen in the years that I've done this work. Often it's the small businesses that are probably more agile in this space and can do accommodations that, again, overall and statistically, accommodations cost less than $500. Okay. And often we find they're free. Because it's simply making an adjustment in a schedule, or providing some support that may be offered even through a local agency that will come in and support that individual at no cost to the employer. So again, a lot of myths out there, and it's important for us to be aware of that. ADA lawsuits have flooded the courts. Again, another myth. Most of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA disputes, really are resolved by informal negotiations, or through the mediation process, through the EEOC. Often that is how they are resolved. So again, not a lot of litigation around the ADA. But that's one of the myths out there. And then finally, the ADA protects troublemakers, or people with difficult or rude personalities. Sometimes you'll hear that, well, individuals are demanding, people with disabilities are demanding in the workplace. And the reality is, and I've said this to many audiences before, you can hire a lot of people, right? And hiring a person with a disability is no different than hiring a person without a disability. And when I say that, you meet a lot of individuals that are just simply not happy individuals. Okay, they're rude, or they've just got a poor personality in terms of their attitude. But it has nothing to do with a disability. And so to suggest that, an inappropriate behavior, again, is somehow qualifying a person as a person with a disability, that's just not the case, right? Miserable people are just simply miserable people. And behavior and inappropriate behavior does not count as a disability. And so again, having that as an excuse, but instead being able to perform the essential functions of the job is the key to making that hiring decision. So when we look deeper at Title I, again, it prohibits private employers, both the state, local government level, including employment agencies and labor unions, from discriminating against qualified individuals with disabilities at all levels of the employment process. So that means from the application process, when they apply, during the hiring or interviewing process, at the point of termination, even advancement, promotional and training opportunities can be, again, a place where an individual with a disability may experience some discrimination, compensation, job training, and other terms and conditions and privileges of employment. So it's important, again, to understand that the ADA is not just about getting hired, but it's about the protection of your rights during that employment experience. So let's talk for just a minute about disclosure. And as I said, I know that Leanne, I think you have this on an upcoming webinar or series that's coming up, but I think it's also important when we talk about your rights in the workplace, because if accommodations are needed, then the ADA does provide for their delivery to improve, again, your work or your ability to perform that job in the workplace. And so disclosure, though, is really what triggers that accommodation process. So if I am a person with a non-visible disability and I choose not to disclose at the point of the interview, and then I go into a position and I may be qualified for the role, but your performance is being impacted by your disability and you have not disclosed and you are terminated, you're going to have difficulty in demonstrating that you were discriminated against because of your disability. Because if you haven't disclosed, they have no idea that you have a disability, right? And so often I was just on campus at a university a week or so ago, and the issue of narcolepsy came up. And it was, the question was, was narcolepsy a disability? And I said, well, absolutely. It qualifies as a disability. Again, it falls into that category of non-visible. And, the individual went on to say, well, there's just some reluctance to disclose and I get that. I do. I have been there. It's something that you're hesitant to disclose because you don't want to set the send the message that you may need some assistance, or there's just a reluctancy. You don't want to be discriminated against, right? However, I went on to say that in the event that it's not an issue at the point of hire, and yes, you can go in and apply and no one would ever know that you had narcolepsy, right? But what if a month, 2 months, 3 months into the job, you have a situation where your medication that you're on that supports you you start to have issues. And all of a sudden, you're having difficulty getting up, you're being late for work on a consistent basis, but yet they're not informed that you have a disability. You're being reprimanded for attendance, just like everybody else is expected to be to work on time. That's when, right, it can get complicated. So because not disclosing, and then at the point of termination, you disclose that you have a disability, the employer has to step back and go, okay, now what, this is why, right, discriminating against people with disabilities is one where you have to disclose, right? You have to share that you are among those with disabilities in order to gain that protection and in order to gain the accommodations that you may need. So again, an example of disclosing on the front end will help to prevent issues that might arise in the future. Again, you may never need an accommodation, but simply letting them know on the front end could be a benefit if you do or when you do. So as a federal contractor under Executive Order 11246, there is an aspirational utilization goal of 7%. So if I'm a federal contractor, I am charged with hiring, again, as an aspirational goal, 7% of my workforce needs to be made up of people with disabilities. And that's at all levels of the organization. So from entry level to mid-level management to all of the categories of employees, that's pretty significant. And that was a big deal when it came out in I think it was 2014, when the definition was expanded and the aspirational goal was set. Again, when we think about disclosure and the benefits, so that is a benefit, right? You can help a company that you're going to work for meet that aspirational or utilization goal. disclosing, as I said, before problems arise can help to build that trust between you and your employer and your manager. Because again, and I often coach students to say, it's so much easier in the beginning of the employment experience or the employment process to say, look, I have X condition and it's not an issue for me now. Here, I've got it under control and it should be no issue. But in the event that things change, I'll be the first to let you know that. And I think that really sets the tone for, number one, you're taking responsibility, right, for your performance and for showing up on time and all of those things. And again, we can't eliminate the attitudinal barriers that are absolutely alive and well out there as it relates to disability. It just is. I'd like to say after 25 years plus of doing this work that that's changed. It hasn't. I think conversations are getting better. I think companies are getting better at again opening up these conversations and navigating some of them. But at the end of the day, people are human, and there's just still a lot of fear around this conversation of disability disclosure. So again, it's important to keep that in mind if you are a person with a disability, taking some time before the interview process and kind of creating your script, right? What is your story and what do you need as an accommodation? Because that's really the important thing. So when we think about functions of the job, under the ADA, we talk a lot about essential functions, and companies are spending a lot of time now focused on job descriptions. Why? Because they used to dump a whole lot of stuff in those job descriptions that may or may not qualify as the essential functions of the job. So they're really paying attention to the types of tasks, the types of functions that each of their job descriptions hold. Because again, employers have to identify these functions in their jobs when they're filling, again, that and when they have those job descriptions, because one is you're posting those jobs to portals, and if you are eliminating candidates as a result of their inability to perform the essential functions of the job, but yet those functions are not essential functions, then they find themselves right in a difficult situation, and people with disabilities will and can cause create a cause of action based on that, because that would be a form of discrimination. So again, creating a welcome sign. We talk a lot to our employers about how can they create cultures that are welcoming to people with disabilities, and as we spend time talking with individuals with disabilities, including college students, I really charge them with looking at how companies are showing up in this space. And there's so much information available to you as you look for the right workplace for you, the right company, the right culture. I really urge you to spend some time and look at how are they showing up online. There's so much information out there about what they're doing in communities, and what companies are doing around diversity. Do they have a diversity strategy that includes people with disabilities? Are their websites showing, again, language that suggests that people with disabilities are welcome to apply? The accommodation process, is that posted on their website? Or when you apply online, is there a way to get accommodations through that process? Again, looking at their job descriptions and understanding what the job really entails, and then taking it upon yourself that as you kind of do those investigative interviews, ask questions specifically about the job and the tasks that are involved if you think that your disability may require an accommodation. It's important for you to kind of do that due diligence during that interview process as well. And then finally, including workers that may have physical disabilities with or without accommodations, being able to perform those jobs and having an awareness from a recruitment perspective, whether or not accommodations can be made for various positions. And so those are the kinds of things conversations we're having with our employer partners. And that can help translate into, again, increased opportunity. And, many times these companies also have employee resource groups that are made up of individuals with disabilities that are already working in their companies. So finding out, right, awards that companies might receive. Maybe they are ranked among best places to work for disability inclusion, those kinds of things. So really doing your homework as you continue to seek opportunities to work with the companies in our area. So some practical recruitment strategies, again, that clearly state qualified people with disabilities are welcome. So when you are, again, completing an application process, always looking for that. And I always encouraged recruiters before as well to mention that when they're talking with candidates, even in career fairs. You've got a lot of companies that show up at your career fairs. Are they talking about diversity? And it's okay to ask them that, right? What is your diversity strategy? And do you offer accommodations for people with disabilities? Where are they posting their jobs? That's an important indicator as well. Do they source talent on portals that are designated, right, or specifically focused on people with disabilities? I know that at Disability in North Carolina, that's one of a big draw for a lot of the companies that we work with. And when we're working with Leanne with the Communability Mentoring Program and other programs, we encourage students to go out and build their profile on this careers portal. It's called the Our Ability Jobs portal, but it's free to set up your profile, similar to a LinkedIn profile. And what that does is that puts you in a portal and gives you access then to being matched to jobs of all types, posted by companies that are specifically looking, again, for the talents of individuals with disabilities. So that's an important indicator for a company or a workplace that may be a good choice. Again, sources from sourcing talents and working directly with career centers, NC Works career centers, vocational rehabilitation. And those are also places, right, where you can gain additional information about supports and accommodations that you might need as you make your transition from college into your career. And quite honestly, it's also an employment opportunity, right? Many of those agencies are looking for the talents of young people with disabilities. And then finally, networking with colleges like we're doing today, right? And other programs to create opportunities for employment. So when we look at the 2023 Disability Equality Index survey, which is a benchmarking tool that many of our employers take, only 36% of employers have specific recruiting strategies for applicants with disabilities. So, that tells us, right, that we have an opportunity to do more, that it's important for companies to, again, be aware of the talent that exists, and and looking for, again, creative ways to create those job descriptions that are open and that speak to the specific tasks of and essential functions of jobs for people with disabilities. And one of the things that we think about when we think about the dynamics and how they have changed, just looking at the last 2 or 3 years, there was a time when one of the most common, or one of a very common accommodation request was to work remotely, right? Or be able to work a part-time at home and maybe come into the office a couple of times a week. Why? Because sometimes it's a transportation issue. Other times it's an environment issue where maybe the accommodations at work are at home or are much, it's just, I can get more work done at home because I have the proper accommodation there. And this, in the past 2 or 3 years with COVID, that changed overnight, right? Where all of a sudden companies figured out how to stay productive and allow their employees to work remotely. And so again, it's an example, right, of just the ongoing changes and opportunities, I think, that that continue to arise to increase the opportunities for people with disabilities to get out in the workforce and to highly achieve what career goals they have set for themselves. So again, the disclosure conversation is an important one. It is unique to each individual with a disability. Yes, there is concern about whether you'll be treated differently after upon disclosing. There are, again, as I said, the law, ADA, and as well as the Rehab Act of 73. Which is a law similar to ADA. It prevents discrimination among federal agencies, but that it really protects individuals with disabilities from employment discrimination. And so job seekers who disclose a disability can also be eligible for additional supports and services from other agencies. So there are benefits to disclosing that you have a disability. But I think the most important part is the confidence that you bring to the position based on your skills, and then creating that trusted relationship with, it may be a hiring manager, it may be your manager, it may be somebody in human resources, but that can really improve that disclosure conversation. Interview questions. So it's important for us to talk a little bit about this, because I think this often comes up, especially when you're new to the interview processes. What can an employer ask me as a job applicant? Can they simply ask, do I have a disability? And the answer is no. But instead, the employer can ask applicants to describe or demonstrate how they might perform a job. Again, whether you've got a visible disability or a non-visible disability, the question needs to be focused on the specifics to the job that you're applying for. And again, if you disclose that you have a disability, then they can ask, do you require an accommodation? And invite you then to request that accommodation and explore what accommodations might be available. Now, there's a note here that talks about no job sampling, and here's why. Sometimes in certain employment situations, individual with disability may be invited to demonstrate how they will perform the essential functions of the job. Now, that is it should be, right, a routine or consistent practice among all applicants, not just individuals with disabilities. But historically, in some circumstances, individuals with disabilities have been brought in, and through that demonstration process, they're actually doing work and not getting paid for it. Okay, so that's not okay. That's not okay. So that's what job sampling is. Sometimes, you know, you're coming in and demonstrating, but you should be paid if you're performing work. So when interviewing, again, some interview strategies, and I'm sharing this with you in the context of your, you know, knowing what your rights are, because this is, you know, this is the message that we send to the companies and the employers that we work with. When interviewing candidates, there are some questions that you should not ask that may be a violation of the ADA. We've talked about that. I mean, if a person comes in and they're among the 74% of people with disabilities that have non-visible disabilities, you can't start off by saying, so are you among the 74% of people with disabilities with a hidden disability? You can't ask that, right? If they have a physical, a visible impairment, again, asking them if they need an accommodation is certainly okay. But stick to the job, right? It's about what you're able to perform in terms of the skills of the position. And so questions around that are okay. If again, you're in an interview, and conversation should always be about the work, right? And not the disability. So do's and don'ts. So again, should someone ask, do you have a physical or mental cognitive disability? No, they should simply say, can you perform the duties of this position with or without an accommodation? They shouldn't ask what your disability is. Now, listen, there are times, and I know there have been times in my interviewing, even with a non-visible disability, that you know, I would bring it up. Well, if you bring it up and you're the person with the disability, then that's fine. You know, having conversations about it. But we always guard, right, recruiters and managers against, you know, the curiosity is one thing, but it's never appropriate to say, so what happened to you, right? How did, what, you know, what, that's not okay. If you bring it up and you want to make it a part of your story and your interview process, then that's certainly a decision for you to make. So do you have an impairment that might affect your ability to perform the work? Again, if an applicant has a known or obviously disability, you can ask them to describe how they perform the job or the duties that you have described in your job description. And of course, it's not appropriate to ask about absences as it would relate to your disability. Again, and never overlook the opportunity that you have as an individual with a disability to educate and help your employer or potential employer in identifying accommodations that might work for you. I think that's important to know too. What have you done to be successful in college, right? How have you navigated your courses of study and found success? Or maybe you had an internship and you've been in the work environment, so you knew what worked for you in that environment. It's okay to share those solutions with potential employers as well, to say, look, I worked in this kind of environment before, and here's what I found success with. That is hugely helpful. And it's also okay to not know. We don't know, you know, what every circumstance will come up. So that's also okay. Go in with confidence, knowing that, you know, you've studied, you've got the skill sets that are necessary, and some things just may be need to be determined at a later date, right? As something comes up, I'll make sure I let you know, right? If I need an accommodation. Right now, I'm good, but I'll let you know. And so I know we covered a lot, and I probably moved pretty quickly. I just, again, want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to talk through any of those.
Thank you.